There is a man who lives a few streets over from me. He is 61 years old. He walks his dog every single morning, rain or shine, and he has done it for 20 years. He has never been overweight a day in his life. He does not smoke. He goes to his checkups. And a couple of months ago, he said something to me that I have not been able to stop thinking about. He said, "I cannot figure out why, by 2 p.m, I feel like I am wading through cement." And then he said the part that really bothers him, the part that makes him question whether something is wrong with him specifically. Nothing changed. He is doing everything he did at 50. Same walks, same food, same weight, same sleep. Nothing changed, and yet something clearly did, and nobody can tell him what. So he went to his doctor, and his blood work came back fine, completely normal, every marker in range. He was told he is in good health for his age, and he was sent home with no explanation and a quiet, sinking feeling that this is simply what happens now, and he had better get used to it. If any of that sounds familiar to you, I need you to hear the next few minutes very carefully, because you are not imagining it, and you are not broken. Here is what almost nobody has been told. Researchers at Stanford followed 108 people ages 25 to 75 for as long as 7 years. They measured more than 135,000 different molecules and microbes inside these people, 246 million data points. And they went looking for what everyone assumed they would find, a nice, gentle, gradual slope of aging, a slow decline, a little each year, exactly the way we all picture it. They did not find one. 81% of the molecules they measured did not change gradually at all. They transformed suddenly in 2 distinct bursts, one around the age of 44 and one around the age of 60. Read that again, because it changes everything about how you should think about your own body. Aging is not a slope. Aging is a staircase, and there is a very large step at 60. So when a healthy 61-year-old tells you that nothing changed, and yet everything feels different, he is not being dramatic, and he is not imagining it. He walked off a step, and nobody warned him the step was there. Today, I am going to walk you through the 5 specific things that break down at that step, why your standard blood work almost certainly missed every one of them, and exactly what you can do about each. And I want to be clear about the spirit of this from the beginning. This is not a video about decline being inevitable. It is the opposite. Because here is the principle underneath everything I am about to tell you, and I want you to hold on to it. Your body is very rarely broken. Your body is blocked. And blocked is a completely different problem, because blocked things can be unblocked. Now, why did his blood work miss all of this? This is one of the most important things in the entire video, so let me explain it clearly. Standard blood work is a magnificent tool, and it is designed to do one specific job: catch disease. It is built to detect the presence of a diagnosable condition. It looks for markers that have crossed a line into pathology. It is not built to catch decline. And there is an enormous gap between not sick and actually well. Millions of people fall into that gap somewhere in their early 60s and never climb back out, because every test they take says they are fine, while their actual experience of living in their body says otherwise. They are told they are healthy. They do not feel healthy. And both of those things are true at the same time. That gap is where we are going to spend the next half hour. Here is what inspired the Stanford team in the first place, and it is a detail that I find genuinely fascinating. There was something that never made sense to researchers. The risk of Alzheimer's disease and cardiovascular disease does not creep upward evenly year after year. It climbs gradually under 60, and then it rises sharply in older age. Think about the logic of that. If aging really were a smooth slope, then disease risk would follow a smooth slope too. It does not, which means something specific is happening at a specific moment. And when the Stanford researchers looked at what changed most dramatically in people in their early 60s, one system stood out above the others: immune function. Hold on to that, because it comes back in a big way when we get to number 4. Before we get into the 5, do me one small kindness, because it genuinely helps this reach the people who need it. Leave a like on this video and subscribe with notifications turned on. And tell me down in the comments what city and state you are watching from, how old you are, and honestly, whether you have had your own version of the 2 in the afternoon cement feeling. I read every single one, and I think you are going to be surprised how many people are describing your exact experience. Now let us start with the first thing that breaks. The first thing that breaks down at 60 is your muscle, and it does not break the way you think it does. Here is what you probably already know. You have been losing muscle since you were around 30, slowly, a little every year. And nobody notices, because for decades you can still carry the groceries, still climb the stairs, still get up off the floor. The loss is real but invisible. After 60, that loss does not simply continue at the same pace. It accelerates. But that is not the hidden part. That is the part your doctor might mention in passing. The hidden part, the part that almost nobody is warned about, is how catastrophically fast it happens the moment you stop moving. Researchers took 11 healthy older adults, average age 67, not sick, healthy, and they put them on bed rest for 10 days. That is all. 10 days. In those 10 days, these healthy older adults lost nearly a full kilogram of lean muscle from their legs. That is roughly 2 pounds of leg muscle gone in 10 days. Their leg strength dropped, their power dropped, and their maximum aerobic capacity fell by 12%. Now think very carefully about what that actually means for real life, because this is the part that should get your attention. 10 days is nothing. 10 days is a bad flu. 10 days is a knee surgery and the recovery after it. 10 days is a hospital stay for something completely unrelated. 10 days is a rough winter where the sidewalks are icy and you decide, sensibly, to stay inside. 10 days is a trip where you sat more than you walked. 10 days is a period of grief where you barely left the house. Every single one of those is a normal part of a normal life. And any one of them, after 60, can cost you 2 pounds of leg muscle and a measurable chunk of your aerobic capacity. And here is the cruelest part of the mathematics. It comes off far faster than it goes back on. A younger body rebuilds quickly. A body past 60 rebuilds slowly if you deliberately work at it, and if you do not deliberately work at it, a great deal of it simply does not come back at all. This is what I mean by the staircase. The person who was fine before the hospital stay and noticeably weaker after it did not age 6 months during that stay. They stepped down. And most people never step back up because nobody told them they had to. So what do you actually do? First, and this is the most important principle in this entire section, after 60, movement is not optional maintenance. It is active defense. Every day you do not move is not neutral. It is a small withdrawal from an account that gets harder to refill each year. Second, resistance work matters more than anything else here, and it does not require a gym. Rising from a chair without using your hands, repeated 8 or 10 times, trains the exact muscles that keep you independent. Heel raises at the kitchen counter, wall push-ups, a pair of inexpensive resistance bands. 2 or 3 short sessions a week is genuinely enough to change the trajectory. Third, and this is the one people never think of, plan for the interruptions, because they will come. When you are laid up for a week, do what you can from where you are. Ankle pumps, leg lifts in bed, sitting up rather than lying flat, standing for 1 minute every hour if you are able. These sound almost too small to matter, and in the context of that 10-day study, they matter enormously. The goal is not to train while you are sick. The goal is to make the drop smaller. And of course, if you are recovering from surgery or illness, Follow the guidance you have been given about what is safe. That is not a caveat I am adding to protect myself. It is genuinely the right approach, because the wrong movement at the wrong time sets you back further. And there is a detail in that bed rest study that deserves its own moment, because it is the one that reframes everything. The muscle loss was measured in the legs specifically, not the arms, the legs, which means the tissue that disappears fastest is precisely the tissue responsible for standing up, climbing stairs, catching yourself when you stumble, and getting off the floor if you fall. The body does not lose muscle evenly. It loses it first exactly where independence lives. That is why 2 pounds sounds trivial and is not. Nobody notices 2 pounds on a scale. But 2 pounds of leg muscle is the difference between rising from a low chair easily and rising from it with effort, and that difference, repeated across a few episodes of illness over a decade, is the entire distance between an independent 75-year-old and one who needs help. So that is the first thing that breaks, the muscle, and the terrifying speed at which it leaves when you stop moving. But here is where it gets stranger, because a great many people watching this are already doing the work. They are eating well, they are moving, and they are still losing ground. Which brings us to the second thing. The second thing that breaks down at 60 is your body's ability to actually respond to the protein you eat. And this one frustrates people more than anything else, because it feels like a betrayal. You did the research, you started eating more protein, you added the eggs, the chicken, the fish, the Greek yogurt. You are doing exactly what everyone told you to do, and your muscles are not listening. There is a name for what is happening, and it is called anabolic resistance. Let me explain it in plain language, because when you understand the mechanism, you will know exactly how to work around it. When you eat protein, your body breaks it down into amino acids. Those amino acids circulate, and when enough of them arrive at your muscle tissue at once, they trigger a signal that essentially says, begin building. That signal is what turns the food you ate into actual muscle repair and growth. Here is the problem. As you age, that signal becomes harder to trigger. The threshold rises. A younger body might respond to a modest amount of protein in a meal. An older body needs considerably more arriving at once to flip the same switch. And notice what that means practically. If you spread a moderate amount of protein evenly across your day, a little at breakfast, a little at lunch, a little at dinner, you may never actually cross the threshold at any single meal. You are eating protein all day and triggering the building signal exactly 0 times. The food goes in, the signal never fires. And you conclude, understandably, that eating protein does not work for you. It works. You simply never reached the switch. There is a second layer to this, and it is one that most people over 60 are quietly guilty of. Total protein intake tends to fall with age. Appetite decreases. Cooking for 1 or 2 feels like less effort than it is worth. Meat becomes harder to chew or harder to afford. Meals get smaller and simpler. So at exactly the moment your body needs more protein to trigger the same response, most people are eating less of it than they did at 40. That combination, higher requirement and lower intake, is why so many careful, health-conscious people lose muscle anyway. So what do you do about it? First, concentrate your protein rather than sprinkling it. Rather than a little at every meal, aim for meals that contain a genuinely substantial serving. For most people, that means making breakfast the meal that changes most, because breakfast is where protein is almost always lowest. Toast and coffee, cereal, a piece of fruit. These are the standard, and none of them come close to triggering anything. Second, front load your day. There is a reason people who add real protein to breakfast often notice a difference within weeks. You are giving your body a building signal early rather than waiting until dinner, which for many people is the only meal where enough protein arrives at once. Third, Pair it with movement. This is the piece almost nobody puts together. Muscle contraction makes the tissue more receptive to the amino acids arriving. Protein plus resistance work is not simply additive. The two multiply each other. Protein without movement is raw material delivered to a construction site with no crew. Movement without protein is a crew with no materials. You need both. And if you have kidney disease or any condition that affects how your body handles protein, this is genuinely a conversation for your doctor before you make big changes. Because in that specific situation, the right amount is a medical question, not a general one. And let me give you a practical picture of what crossing that threshold actually looks like on a plate. Because vague advice helps nobody. A breakfast of toast, jam, and coffee is essentially zero. A bowl of cereal with milk is low. 3 eggs is a genuine serving. A cup of Greek yogurt with some nuts is a genuine serving. A piece of fish or chicken the size of your palm at lunch is a genuine serving. Cottage cheese, beans and lentils, milk and eggs are among the most affordable ways to get there. Which matters, because protein advice is often written as though everyone can buy salmon twice a week. And if chewing has become difficult, which is far more common past 60 than anyone discusses, that is not a reason to give up on protein. Eggs, yogurt, cottage cheese, lentil soups, and blended smoothies all deliver substantial amounts with minimal chewing. The obstacle is real and it has straightforward solutions, but only if somebody names it out loud. So the first thing that breaks takes your muscle when you stop moving. The second blocks the rebuild signal even when you are doing everything right. But there is a third thing happening further upstream, and it may be the one that explains the most, because it determines whether any of the nutrition you eat actually makes it into your body at all. The third thing that breaks down at 60 is your stomach, and almost nobody has ever told you about it. Here is the mechanism, and it is remarkably simple once you know it. Your stomach produces acid. That acid does more than break down food. It is what allows your body to actually extract certain nutrients from what you eat and free them up so your body can absorb them. Chief among them are vitamin B12, iron, calcium, magnesium, and zinc. And as we age, stomach acid production commonly declines. For many people, it declines significantly. Now follow the chain of what happens next, because this is where so many mysterious 60-year-old symptoms come from. You are eating well, genuinely well, good food, real ingredients, adequate variety, but your stomach can no longer liberate the nutrients from that food efficiently. So the nutrients pass through you. Your diet looks excellent on paper, and your body is receiving a fraction of what is on the plate. And what happens when you are quietly low in those specific nutrients? Low B12 produces fatigue, brain fog, memory problems, tingling in the hands and feet, and a general sense of mental slowness. Low iron produces exhaustion, breathlessness on stairs you used to climb easily, and a pale, drained feeling. Low magnesium produces muscle cramps, poor sleep, and a restless, wired but tired sensation. Low zinc affects immune function and wound healing. Now look at that list and tell me it does not describe the exact complaints of half the people over 60 that you know. And here is why your standard blood panel probably did not catch it. A basic panel may not test for all of these at all. And even when it does, the reference ranges are typically wide enough that you can be at the very bottom of normal, feeling genuinely terrible, and be told your results are fine. There is a real difference between not deficient and actually sufficient, and the standard panel is built to detect the first one. There is one more piece here that I want to handle very carefully, because it is important and it must not be misunderstood. A great many people over 60 take medications that reduce stomach acid for heartburn or reflux, often daily and often for many years. Those medications are prescribed for real reasons and they help a great many people, and I am absolutely not telling you to stop taking anything. What I am telling you is that long-term acid reduction is well known to affect the absorption of some of these same nutrients, particularly B12, which makes it exactly the sort of thing worth raising with your doctor so that your levels can be checked and monitored. That is a conversation, not a decision you make alone. And please never stop or change a prescribed medication because of something you heard in a video, including this one. So what can you actually do? First, ask for the specific tests rather than assuming a standard panel covered it. Ask about B12, iron and ferritin, vitamin D, and magnesium. Ask where you fall in the range, not simply whether you are normal. Write the numbers down so you can watch the trend over time, because a number drifting toward the bottom over 3 years tells you far more than a single result. Second, support digestion mechanically, and this sounds almost too simple to matter. Chew your food thoroughly, genuinely thoroughly, because digestion begins in the mouth, and most people over 60 have quietly stopped chewing properly. Do not drink large amounts of liquid with meals, which dilutes what acid you do produce. Sit down and eat without distraction, because your digestive system genuinely works better when you are not in a hurry. Third, some traditional approaches, like a small amount of apple cider vinegar in water before a heavy meal, are used by many people for this exact reason. Though the research is limited and it is not appropriate for everyone, particularly anyone with ulcers or reflux. That one is worth discussing with a professional rather than experimenting with blindly. So, the muscle leaves quickly, the rebuild signal gets harder to trigger, and the raw materials do not get absorbed properly. Any one of those would be enough to explain a decline. But there is a fourth thing, and it is the one that runs quietly underneath the other three, burning through the whole system while you sleep. The fourth thing that breaks down at 60 is the balance of your immune system, and what results is a silent fire. Remember what I said at the beginning, that when Stanford looked at what changed most dramatically in the early 60s, one system stood out above all others. This is it. Immune function. Here is what happens, and I want to explain it properly because it connects to everything else. Your immune system is designed to produce inflammation. That is not a flaw. That is its job. When you cut your finger, inflammation is what rushes to the site, fights off infection, clears the damage, and begins the repair. Short-term inflammation is healing in action. The problem is when the fire never goes out. As we age, the immune system tends to shift toward a state of persistent, low-grade, background inflammation. It is running all the time, at a low level, in the absence of any actual injury or infection. Researchers have a name for this. They call it inflammaging, and it is considered one of the central drivers of age-related decline. Now here is why this is the most destructive item on this list, and why it deserves its position. It undermines everything else we have discussed. Chronic inflammation directly interferes with muscle building. It pushes the body toward breaking tissue down rather than building it up, which means it works against the exact process you are trying to trigger with your protein and your resistance training. It interferes with the signaling we talked about in Reason 2. It contributes to insulin resistance, making blood sugar harder to manage. It damages blood vessels, which affects everything downstream, including the brain. And it is deeply implicated in the risk of cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline, which is precisely the pattern that made the Stanford researchers curious in the first place. You could be doing everything right in the first 3 areas and still lose ground, because there is a fire burning underneath. And here is the part that connects it to your blood work. The standard panel usually does not measure inflammation at all. There is a common, inexpensive marker called high-sensitivity CARP, and it is simply not included in most routine testing. So the single process most implicated in age-related decline is very often not measured, and everything comes back normal. What actually drives that fire higher? A few things, and most of them are within your influence. excess weight, particularly around the abdomen, because that tissue is metabolically active and produces inflammatory signals. Poor sleep, which raises inflammatory markers reliably. Chronic stress, a diet heavy in ultra-processed food, refined sugar, and industrial seed oils. Sedentary living, which is why movement appears again. Poor dental health, which is genuinely underrated as a source of chronic inflammation. And smoking, which pours fuel directly on the fire. What calms it down? Sleep first, and it is not negotiable. 7 to 9 hours is not a luxury for people over 60. It is when the repair happens and when inflammatory signaling resets. If your sleep is genuinely poor, that alone deserves attention because you cannot out-supplement bad sleep. Movement again, and notice how many times movement appears on this list. Regular moderate activity is one of the most reliable anti-inflammatory interventions available, and it does not require intensity. Food, and specifically the pattern, rather than any individual item. More vegetables, more fruit, more fiber, more fatty fish and olive oil, fewer ultra-processed products, and less added sugar. The traditional Mediterranean pattern keeps appearing in this research for exactly this reason. And stress, which is the one people dismiss and should not. Chronic stress keeps the inflammatory system activated. Whatever genuinely calms your nervous system, time outdoors, time with people you love, prayer, breathing practices, gardening, is doing measurable work, not merely making you feel nicer. And you can ask for the CARP test. It is inexpensive and it gives you an actual number to watch rather than a vague sense of whether things are improving. So, the muscle leaves, the signal fails, the nutrients do not absorb, and a fire burns underneath all of it. And now we come to the fifth item, which is different from the other four, because it is not a mechanism. It is a measurement, and it may be the single most useful piece of information in this entire video. The fifth thing that breaks down at 60 is your grip strength. And what the research says about it is genuinely remarkable. Let me give you the study, because the scale of it matters. It is called the Pure Study. Nearly 140,000 adults across 17 countries followed for 4 years, one of the largest studies of its kind ever conducted. And a substantial part of what they did was extraordinarily simple. They squeezed people's hands. They used a hand dynamometer, which is a small device you grip as hard as you can, and it gives you a number. Here is what they found. For every 5 kilograms, roughly 11 pounds, of lost grip strength, all-cause mortality risk rose by 16%. Cardiovascular death risk rose by 17%. Stroke risk rose by 9%. And then there is the finding that I think should be written on the wall of every clinic in the world. Grip strength was a stronger predictor of all-cause mortality and cardiovascular mortality than systolic blood pressure. Your handshake told the researchers more about your future than the blood pressure cuff did. And that held after they adjusted for age, smoking, physical activity, and everything else they could account for. It held across every income level, every region, and every country in the study. Now stop for a moment, because this is genuinely the kind of thing most people go their entire lives without hearing. If you know someone in their 60s or beyond who has been told their blood work is fine while they feel like they are steadily losing ground, send this to them. Not with a lecture attached, just send it. Because what they have been told is that nothing is wrong, and what they have been experiencing is that something clearly is, and living in the gap between those two things is genuinely demoralizing. There is an explanation, it is not their imagination, and most of it is workable. That is information that changes how someone approaches the next 20 years, and it only reaches them if somebody decides to carry it to them. Now the obvious question, why on earth would hand strength predict so much? Because your grip is not really about your hands. Grip strength reflects your vascular health, your nervous system function, your muscle mass, and your overall cardiorespiratory fitness all at once. It is a snapshot of how well multiple systems are aging together. Researchers have started describing it as a functional vital sign, and one editorial that ran alongside the pure results suggested it might serve as a biomarker of aging across the entire life course. In other words, it is the dashboard light for everything else in this video. Muscle loss shows up in it, inflammation shows up in it, nutritional status shows up in it, cardiovascular health shows up in it. One squeeze, and you get a signal from all of it. So here is what to do, and this is the most actionable thing I will give you today. Get a hand dynamometer. They cost around $20. Test your grip strength. Write the number down with today's date. Then test it again in 90 days. That number is your report card, and it does not care about your excuses. It does not care how good your cholesterol looks. You cannot rationalize it, and you cannot talk your way around it. It simply tells you the truth about the direction you are heading, which is exactly what almost nobody over 60 actually has. And if it goes up, you are winning. It is that simple. In a subject full of complexity, that is a genuinely clean signal. Now, how do you train it? Farmer carries are the best tool I know for this, and they require nothing. Hold something heavy in each hand and walk. Kettlebells if you have them, but a bag of books, 2 full water jugs, or the actual grocery bags work perfectly. Walk 20 or 30 feet, set them down, rest, and go again. Your entire body works, your grip works hardest, and your posture and core come along for the ride. Hanging from a bar is the other one, if it is appropriate for your body and you have access to it. Simply hang for as long as you can, drop down, rest, and repeat. And if you cannot support your full weight, keep your heels on the ground and hang partially. You will still benefit substantially. And if your hands or wrists have arthritis or an injury, please adapt rather than push through. There are gentler ways to work grip, including simple squeezing tools, and it is worth asking a physical therapist what is appropriate for your specific situation. So let us bring this home, because when you put all 5 together, something clarifying emerges. Look at the chain. The first item takes your muscle through inactivity. The second blocks the signal that rebuilds it. The third blocks the raw materials from ever getting in. The fourth burns the whole system down from the inside while you sleep. And the fifth is the measurement that tells you honestly which direction you are heading. They are not 5 separate problems. They are one connected process. And that is genuinely good news because it means you do not need 5 separate solutions. Look at what appears again and again across all of them. Movement appears in all 5. Protein appears in 3. Sleep appears in 2 and affects the others. Reducing processed food appears throughout, which means a small number of habits applied consistently work on the entire system simultaneously. And I want to return to where we started, because Stanford's own interpretation of their findings was that these 2 moments, the mid-40s and the early 60s, are not simply when things fall apart. They are the windows where intervention matters most. If 81% of your molecules are transforming at a specific moment, then that specific moment is when what you do carries the greatest weight. You are not too late. You are, if anything, standing at exactly the point where effort pays the largest dividend. And this is why I keep saying that your body is not broken. Your body is blocked. Blocked muscle signaling, blocked nutrient absorption, blocked recovery because of a fire nobody measured. Every single one of those is a blockage, and blockages can be cleared. That is a fundamentally different situation from a machine that is simply wearing out, and it is worth letting that difference sink in. Because most people over 60 have quietly accepted the wearing out story without ever being offered the other one. Now, I want to be completely honest and responsible with you, because your safety matters more than any video. I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. Everything here is general information drawn from published research, offered so that you can ask better questions and make better everyday choices. It is not a substitute for personal guidance from a qualified health professional who knows your history. Before starting a new exercise routine, significantly changing your diet, or requesting changes to your care, please talk with your doctor, especially if you have heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, balance problems, or any diagnosed condition. And please, never stop, start, or change any prescribed medication on your own because of something you heard in a video, including anything I said about stomach acid. Bring the question to your doctor and let them look at your whole picture. These ideas are meant to work alongside good medical care, never instead of it. So here is what I want you to actually do with this, and I want you to pick just one thing rather than trying to do all 5, because 5 changes at once is how people quit by Thursday. If you have been sedentary, start with movement, because it appears in every single item on this list. If you already move, look hard at your breakfast protein, because that is where most people are quietly starving the rebuild signal. If you feel foggy and exhausted despite eating well, ask for the nutrient panel and get your actual numbers. If you carry extra weight around the middle and sleep badly, the fire is where your effort will pay most. And whatever you choose, buy the dynamometer and get your baseline number. Because 90 days from now, you want evidence, not a feeling. Because here is the thing about that man in my neighborhood, and it is the reason I told you about him at all. He is not sick. He was never sick. He simply walked off a step that nobody told him existed, and then spent 2 years believing that the tiredness was who he is now. It is not who he is now. It is a set of specific, identifiable, workable things happening in a specific window. And the difference between the people who spend their 70s strong and the people who spend them shrinking is not luck, and it is very rarely genetics. It is whether anyone ever told them the step was there. Now you know it is there. So tell me down in the comments, which of these 5 do you think is hitting you hardest right now, and what has been your version of the 2 in the afternoon cement feeling? Be specific, because someone reading is going to see their exact experience described by a stranger, and that recognition matters more than you would think. And if you have had blood work come back fine while you felt terrible, say so, because I suspect that comment section is going to be full of people who thought they were the only one. If this gave you something nobody had told you before, please give it a like and share it with someone in their 60s who deserves to know that they are not imagining it. Subscribe with the bell on so you do not miss what is next. And if you want to go further with this, the next video takes the first item on this list and shows you exactly what to do about it, step by step at home, with nothing but a chair. It is on the screen now and it is already waiting for you, so do not close the app. Go straight there. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.